My name is Crosby Lyles, and this is News from the Can. I have Vegas up here because I'm basically demonstrating that I've stopped production on my latest update here because some details need to kind of sort of be fleshed out a little bit, explaining the situation with carbon-13 and the analysis of where methane is coming from. And it's a little murky, and it's sort of, it looks fishy. Let me just put it that way. But what you need to know is, methane-wise, the shit is hitting the fan. Okay? So let's just get right to it. This is all you need to see right here, I guess. Well, you know, look, go to Copernicus. You know, to me, visuals, that's sort of like the end-all, be-all. You know, you can say what you want. Oh, well, levels are up and blah, blah. And I'm like, where? The devil is in the details. You tell me, oh, well, methane levels are up here and there and to a certain level, or, you know, carbon dioxide is up to 400 parts per million, blah, 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 from Mauna Loa, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, unless you're actually showing me where the hell it is, you know, I mean, there's some, the atmosphere is pretty big as far as human beings go. I need some specifics. That's why I like Copernicus. That's why I like looking at the Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service, because it's pretty specific. What I can't really see from here, and it's because I haven't really fished around that much on the site itself, I cannot see point source emissions. But what I can see, I've never seen methane, as long as I've been doing this, you know, since 2012, I have never seen methane like this. This is like ridiculous. This is absurd. And I think the last time that I made a video and I looked at it, it was pretty horrendous. You know, I checked the global view instead of the Arctic, and up here where it says area, that's where you can check that. So here's your global. That's your global view. That's pretty ridiculous. I have not, this is total column. I haven't seen a total column that looked like this. Well, maybe last year. It was a lot, but it wasn't as much as it is now. And then, of course, you can see Europe, and I won't click through them all because, you know, it'd take too much time. But you can see that it's got Central Europe, Northwest Europe, Northeast Europe, Southwest Europe, Southeast Europe, Northern Africa, North Atlantic, Arctic, Antarctic, North America, Central America, South America, Eurasia, Southern Asia, Western Asia. So global is handy, because then you can see basically where a lot of stuff is coming from. If you go to the surface level, it pretty much shows you what the hot spots are, what could be thought of as being as close to a point source on this particular tab that we're able to see. So I imagine at this point, judging by material that's been done by others and stuff, this is just have a think, and he's talking about shale gas production. So the link for this video is in the description, and he pretty much runs it down pretty well, as far as being able to see that shale gas production ramps up around 2006. I've done a bunch of videos about this. You know, the Iraq War, actually, the price of a barrel of oil was about around 2002, 2003 was like $17 a barrel. They started the Afghanistan war, and then the Iraq war, and the psychology of war, the activity of war drives up the price of oil. So the price of a barrel of oil shot up between 2006 and 2008 to $145 a barrel because of the war. So that made fracking profitable. And he mentions a guy that ended up getting indicted and ended up crashing his car and blah because of all that. There's a bunch of people that should have gone to jail that haven't, you know, frankly. So shale gas exploration goes up at the same time. That's pretty much your marker for when methane in the atmosphere starts to go up. And he's saying correlation does not necessarily equal causation, but when you look at the isotopic data. So the isotopic data is known. But anyway, he lays it out pretty well. So this is my video from May 23rd, 2017, a couple of years before his video. And the woman speaking here is Dr. Lori Breweiler, and she's talking about this survey that they did. So the chronology goes like this, and this is interesting. When you look at the graph over here on Mr. Borlace's thing, previous to 2006, methane emissions were down. Now let's go over here and look at this. This is a link to this video. Arctic methane budget, new estimates by NOAA. So it's Dr. Lori Breweiler with NOAA. Hit the link. Video's not available. Do the math, folks.
Playing off of the spatial gradients that we get from our network observations. So what I'm showing you here.
There. Okay. She's a heavy hitter. This is not some bullshit we're throwing around here. We're trying to get to the real story, and real fuckery. You know, you got to have some veracity to get to the real fuckery. But this bit you see right here, methane growth. The year is on the x-axis on the bottom, and it starts 1985 to 2010. And so the warm colors are for higher growth in methane in the atmosphere, and the cooler colors are for lower growth. And you can see that it goes that the middle line is the equator, and the top line is the North Pole, and the bottom line is the South Pole. And you can see that methane growth in the atmosphere was heavier in 1985. So it had gone up and up and up. And then, as Mr. Borlace says in his video, it kind of healed over a little bit. Methane started to sort of decline. Methane concentration growth in the atmosphere started to decline between 1992 and 2006. And so by 2006-ish, it was pretty reasonable. So 2007, right around there, and I believe it's between 2007 2009, is when you start hearing from Guy McPherson about the extinction of humanity and clathrate meltdown and all that stuff in the Arctic. 2012 is when Dr. Shakova comes in, and I'm kind of zoomed in on this bit here where she goes into, which makes him think the worst thing might happen. That's the big dramatic, the shot that went around the world, and everybody freaked the fuck out about methane. Okay? They just did. And then, so I'm just giving you the chronology here. So methane had been down. Methane was down, right? So they ramp up. So you look at the timing now. Methane was down, and then all of a sudden they start fracking in 2006, 2007, right? And then they're releasing shit tons of methane into the atmosphere, which has a lower level of carbon-13, and I'm going to explain what that deal is in a second, right? And then contemporaneous with all that, Sharakova is talking about how everything has looked anomalous over the previous 10 years, from 2002 to 2012. The ice doesn't look right, blah, blah, blah. It makes him think the worst thing might happen. Everybody freaks the fuck out. And then a virtual fucking army descends upon the Earth to do a survey of methane around the world. And Dr. Breweiler talks about this. That's the North Pole. Okay, so look, teragrams per year.
Methane emissions vary with latitude. We don't really agree very well, ultimately, on the distribution of the emissions. Now, the blue box in the high latitudes is what I want to focus on for the rest of this talk, because what I want to talk about is how do we know what the budget of Arctic methane emissions are?
What she's saying is these initials right here, when you look down this list, these are all the people from all around the world, teams of people from different universities and NOAA and what's that, SCIA or SCIA, something like that, and GOSAT, and they're using satellite telemetry data and field data and all this stuff, and she'll tell you that they're using different assumptions of starting points and this and that. But this is an army, a literal fucking army of people went out and did methane surveys around the world, and these are their results. Of all these results, these lines are the results that they came up with, and basically it's the usual suspects. Rice paddies and wetlands between 60 degrees or 30 degrees south latitude and 60 degrees north latitude, roughly. And what they demonstrate here, when you see this blue box here, what that's telling you is that there is, at this particular point, and I think this video came out in like 2012. It was published December 8th, 2016, somewhere in there. But anyway, her talk is from earlier than that. And these events are basically around 2012. That's the Sharikova thing. That's where Sharikova makes him think. Okay, so, she gets referenced. She's still putting out papers and stuff like that. In the same breath, her opening comments, by the way, at this conference, her opening comments were, and we think this area over here in the East Siberian Sea is the largest hydrocarbon stock in the world. That's her first words. So there's an amalgam of horseshit here, right? That is sort of interesting. So the army goes out, and this is what they find. This is, this pretty much you can see, and there's a bit of disagreement in here about some of the, the specific amounts. But in general, the shape of the thing is, it's basically the usual suspects. Between 30 degrees south latitude and 60 degrees north latitude. Nothing to see here, pretty much. And Dr. Lori Brueiler will go on to say the samples that they got from the atmosphere, the isotopic equivalent was wood, which is where they have normalized to for the past, I don't know how many decades. Where this came from is radiocarbon dating. 99% of carbon on Earth is carbon-12. 1% is carbon-13. And carbon-13 and carbon-12 are stable isotopes, so we can sort of kind of assume that because they're stable, that those amounts have existed since they were produced in the belly of suns, so to speak. Carbon-14 is produced in the upper atmosphere. Typically, a lot of it was produced during nuclear testing, before the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, Atmospheric Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. But basically it's from the capture of thermal neutron by nitrogen. So it decays, and it decays in, what does it say here, about 5,730 years, somewhere in there. And so they use that known half-life to date things, in particular life forms. And so the way that this works is that carbon-14, so plants, I'm going to read, this is a direct read here from this. Plants take up carbon-14 by fixing atmospheric carbon through photosynthesis. Animals then take carbon-14 into their bodies when they consume plants or consume other animals that consume plants. Thus, living plants and animals have the same ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 as the atmospheric carbon, as atmospheric CO2. Once organisms die, they stop exchanging carbon with the atmosphere and thus no longer take up new carbon-14. Radioactive decay then gradually depletes the carbon-14 in the organism. This effect is the basis of radiocarbon dating. So when plants and animals die, they stop uptaking carbon-14. So whatever carbon-14 they have in their bodies begins to decay. So if you measure how much carbon-14 is in their body and then compare it to how much is in the atmosphere, because the carbon-14 in the atmosphere is continually being replaced because of thermal neutrons. There's a cosmic ray interaction, And so I haven't delved into that, but we can leave it at that. It's a kind of a moot point. But anyway, it's replenished in the atmosphere. So there's like a regular steady amount, more or less, of carbon-14 in the atmosphere. Whereas once an animal or a plant dies, then it will begin to decay, and it will be less and less and less. You can compare it to how much is in the atmosphere. But the problem they were having early in the 20th century is they figured out that fossil fuels, because they're ancient, don't have any carbon-14. There's no carbon-14 in fossil fuels, whether it's methane or, shale deposits certainly, or coal or any of that other stuff. And so what happens is when you burn fossil fuels, it drives down, it dilutes the amount of carbon-14 that you have in the atmosphere, so it throws off your estimate for how old something is. Because all of a sudden it's like, well, you have to account for that. You have to account for the fact that there isn't as much carbon-14 in the atmosphere, and it's continually depleting. Otherwise, it'll throw off your results. So you have to accurately be able to figure out how much carbon-14 there is in the atmosphere. And so anthropogenic emissions, we're driving that down. We're polluting we're messing up the results. So it's a Suess effect. I think that's how you pronounce that. Suess. Looks like Suess effect. Is this effect where carbon isotopes, where carbon-14 in particular is being driven out? Well, not only that, fixed carbon in terrestrial plants is depleted, and carbon-13 compared to atmospheric CO2. This depletion, this is a direct read here from Wikipedia, and it's sort of like, passe or whatever to quote Wikipedia, but I do it because basically the material is pretty much vetted. It's, you can pretty much hang your hat on it pretty much, and especially with something like this. But anyway, because carbon-13 is a little heavier, fixed carbon in terrestrial plants is depleted in carbon-13 compared to atmospheric CO2. This depletion is slight in C4 plants, but much greater in C3 plants, which form the bulk of terrestrial biomass worldwide. So C3 plants don't seem to uptake as much carbon-13. And that's where your biomass comes from. Depletion in CAM plants vary between the values observed. So this is like a pineapple. It's arid plants. Plants in arid regions have a method of storing CO2 so that they can close their pores so they don't lose water. And so they have like an oxalic acid process where they can actually store CO2 and then, off gas or take up gas at night, and they don't lose as much water. It's kind of a particular kind of thing. So their depletion values are between C3 and C4 plants. So in addition, most fossil fuels originate from C3 biological material produced tens to hundreds of millions of years ago. C4 plants did not become common until about 6 to 8 million years ago, and although CAM photosynthesis is present in modern relatives of the lepidodendrales of the Carboniferous lowland forests, even if these plants also had CAM photosynthesis, they were not a major component of the total biomass. So basically, the plants where fossil fuels come from, coal, oil, gas, contained less carbon-13 just because their process, that heavier carbon, for whatever reason, is not as readily turned into plant matter. They don't uptake it as much. So there's less of a carbon-13 concentration in those plants as in the atmosphere. So therefore, you can expect that the fossil fuel that comes from those plants is going to have a similar lower concentration of carbon-13 than what you would find in the atmosphere. So when you burn that fossil fuel, it's going to drive down the level of carbon-13 in the atmosphere as well. So that's where that comes from. Fossil fuels such as coal and oil are made primarily of plant material that was deposited millions of years ago. This period of time equates to thousands of half-lives of carbon-14. So essentially all the carbon-14 in fossil fuel is decayed. So there's no carbon-14. Fossil fuels are also depleted in carbon-13 relative to the atmosphere because they were originally formed from living organisms. Therefore, the carbon fossil fuels that is returned to the atmosphere through combustion is depleted in both carbon-13 and carbon-14 compared to atmospheric carbon dioxide. So that's how you can track, theoretically, that's how you can track carbon emissions. And so the same should hold for methane. Okay? Now, so here's the thing. Dr. Breweiler here, you can't find his video anymore that she made. It's a NOAA video. She says that it bears on the Arctic feedback. She says there's no evidence for Arctic methane feedback because the isotopic makeup of the methane that's in the atmosphere at this particular time, in 2000, there it is, Kirsch et al. 2012. So as of 2012, she's saying that the methane in the atmosphere back then has the same isotopic makeup as wood, which would lead one to believe that the methane was coming from wetlands. That's basically what she was saying. Coming from rice fields in India and China and wetlands, not from permafrost.
Now, the blue box in the high latitudes is what I want to focus on for the rest of this talk, because what I want to talk about is how do we know what the budget of Arctic methane emissions are? And if we use one of these top-down atmospheric observation approaches, does that agree with what we learn when we go out in the field and measure fluxes directly? So when we go out in the field and measure fluxes directly, that's called the bottom-up approach. And so I've compiled in the table here some fairly recent studies which use field measurements to and scale them up for the whole Arctic, and try to estimate what is the total effect of these processes.
She's basically saying the total annual budget of Arctic methane is 76 trillion grams of methane per year. 76 trillion grams is 76 million metric tons. Where this information came from is from actual point source analysis from
bottom-up approach.
They went out in the field and they measured it. Now here's the turd in the punch bowl. Plants of these particular C3 varieties, they don't uptake carbon-13, so it's going to be less prevalent in methane. So then they come out with this thing. This is new. This is June 17, 2021. New analysis shows microbial sources fueling rise of atmospheric methane. Carbon isotope analysis allows scientists to identify the source of the carbon in a methane sample by carefully measuring the ratio of most common form of carbon, carbon-12, and its stable isotope, carbon-13, which has one extra neutron. That means carbon-13 is ever so slightly heavier than carbon-12. Fossil fuels like the methane and natural gas have unique signatures on the ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12. Methane produced from modern microbes in settings such as wetlands, landfills, and agriculture have just a small amount of carbon-13, so the signature of microbial methane is lighter than methane from fossil fuels. So they're saying that it's even lighter. Wetlands, landfills, agriculture have just a small amount of carbon-13, so the signature. It's a little murky. Let's see who this is. This is Xin Lan, CIRES scientist, CIRES. Scientists working at NOAA's Global Monitoring Laboratory has tested the leading theories for surging methane levels by analyzing the stable carbon isotope ratios of carbon-13 from methane capture in a large set of global air samples to determine if one of the theories is more feasible than the others. And basically they're saying, no, it's not. So as Mr. Borlase was saying, this is 2019 when he put this up, October 13, 2019. The ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12, in other words, the isotopic, meaning the isotope analysis of the gases in the atmosphere, pretty much pegged that this gas rise was coming from shale deposits. So they're making it sound like methane released from modern microbes is even lighter in carbon-13 than methane from fossil fuels. The estimate also provided new estimates on fossil fuel and methane emissions. Methane emissions from fossil fuel were estimated at between 130 and 152 million metric tons per year, significantly larger than the 108 million metric tons per year estimated by the Global Carbon Project. Their estimate of microbial contributions was between 360 and 420 million metric tons per year. So that's just more than double the amount from fossil fuels. Co-authors on the team included scientists from NOAA, NASA, the University of Maryland, Purdue University, Dalhousie University, the European Commission, Joint Research Center, the Italians. So they're saying that if these emissions are coming from microbes due to global warming, and that this footprint that you're seeing here, for thousands of years, the king daddy of methane emissions came from wetlands and rice fields in India and China for the last 11,000 years probably. But you also see releases here coming from the Persian Gulf area and coming from Europe. And these emissions, and it should be pointed out that these emissions are heavier in the wintertime. It's cold in the wintertime. August 24th, 2021. And that's what the methane looks like back then. That's total column, global area. That's in August, 4 months ago. That's in August, 4 months ago. And this is what it looks like now. Now this is the surface level. Let's compare apples to apples. Total column. That's the total column now. So that looks like, to me, that would definitely be a heavier concentration. It's wintertime in the northern hemisphere. How is it that you're having, so it should be, so microbial activity in under colder conditions should be less, right? Should be less. So this is what the methane, this is a total column of methane, August 24th, 2021. That's your total column. It's less in the middle of August in the northern hemisphere, which is the dead of summer, right? Compared to now, which is December 28th. This is wintertime, folks. And this is what it looks like now. This is, let me show you. So we got apples and apples here going. Total column, global area, and it's off the chain. And just so you can see, all right, so you see this, I'm going to go to the Arctic. I didn't open that up on this video over here, so I won't have a comparison for that necessarily. But it's like, holy shit. Holy shit. This is ice. This is, I have this, this link is in the description. nsidc.org. I just picked them out of a hat, you know. So here's your sea ice concentration. Basically, the sea ice is back. When you look at 2 meter temperature anomaly, and this is over Montana and Saskatchewan's over here. I'm sorry, I don't know my Canadian provinces. I should, but I really don't. That pinkish color is about, between 18 degrees and 24 degrees Celsius below the 1979-2000 baseline. And then, of course, it's warmer than average down here in the south. So with temperatures like that, even if it's only for a part of the time, even if the temperature goes back up again, the devil is in the details. Maybe somebody's got information, a study out there that says, well, you could have methane go completely off the fucking chain with temperatures like that from microbial activity. Right? Let's compare it. Let's get our app. See, this is the equatorial cold from that band of CO2 around that's wrapped around the equator. Which band of CO2, Rich? I'll show you. Well, you've seen it before. If you've been watching my channel, you know about it already. I'm going to show you that in a second. Bottom up, there's Antarctica. Then this is summertime down there. So yeah, this is I think this is as good as it gets to kind of show you kind of looking down. So there's that, and here's Cam's, and yeah, so what I'm saying is that this is not originating from the ocean. Probably not. Probably not. I want to go down to the surface level real quick. Surface level. And to me, that's going to show you, what is this? Fallsbard is up here. I think this is Fallsbard up here. And I think this is an oil and or gas facility up here where you see this leak. And a general green hue. Now, I mean, yeah, it's microbes in the ocean, maybe. There's maybe sewage in the oceans or something, or sewage in the landscape. But these signatures look very much like oil and gas infrastructure. And why is it more so in the wintertime when you start seeing more point source emissions in Europe and America, frankly, North America, of methane? So you'll notice that Europe in August, the methane emissions are less, considerably less. I kind of let it play for a little while. But you can see this is in August. There's no methane being released at all from Europe. I mean, there's some, but not much. There's not much methane, and really, there's not that much from North America either. Pretty clean. Looks like there's a little bit coming from Colombia, the Colombia, Venezuela area. But, that's rice fields in India, principally. The usual suspects compared to today, and it's all Europe. It's all Europe, and, they were just talking about gas production and selling Russian gas to Europe because they're going to have a cold winter. And in America, you can see it's higher there too. That's surface level. Let's see. Let me look at that again. That was that's total column. And total column, forget about it. Total column is off the chain. Totally off the chain. But you can see the point source emissions are Europe and North America. You got a bit coming from China. That ain't no microbial stuff. So there's your point source emissions right there. And this happens every year. This happens in the wintertime. It happens in the wintertime. So how is it that when you have colder temperatures, right? Don't microbes require warm temperatures? Don't they like warm temperatures to produce methane and stuff like that? As a matter of fact, isn't that kind of sort of exothermic? The production of methane, which causes, feedbacks and the consumption of permafrost and all this. So that's all across Europe. So, it looks like FUD. To be kind, this looks like FUD. So, like, how are you going to be able to really nail that down? How much does anybody really know about the difference between carbon-13 ratios in microbial emissions and carbon-13 emissions of natural gas, that is leaked from oil and gas exploration or that is sold in a pipeline. So this is 2019, and he's saying, yeah, definitively, isotopic analysis shows, yeah, there's a linkage between shale gas production and atmospheric methane. And then these guys turn around and say, nah, not really. No. And who's going to argue with that? Well, this is just here so that, right? And this is the NOAA. This is post-fucking Trump NOAA. Not to put too fine a point on it. This is post-Trump NOAA. Casting doubt on where the point source emissions come from. And the whole thing with Sharikova is, Sharikova comes out with this, Dr. Sharikova comes out with this whole narrative, like around 2012, when you can see, this is 2012, this is when the big bump in shale gas production comes up, and when you see an elevation in methane production. This is 2012, and all of a sudden, Dr. Sharikova's coming out here saying everything looks anomalous. Everything looks anomalous. So it's like, is it cover? Or as I said in another video, I got another video out there. This is Russia's big doomsday swindle. July 10th, 2017. So they were talking about this. Well, they were talking about this 2016. This is, humans could be extinct in 9 years. Yeah. Sure.
The methane came to the atmosphere. That is why we are telling that this should be the largest hydrocarbon stock in the world over there.
Got it. So, American production of shale gas production goes up in 2012. Sharikova comes out and starts squawking about the end of the fucking world. This video that I produced back here, the Russia swindle thing, is all about political. The big game in mineral production around the world is to shut down production in your competing countries. Australia, this is why you get Sky News, right-wing news from Australia, is because they're always, the coal fields and other mineral, it's all they have in Australia. They've got minerals and tourism, okay? So it's somebody's always coming down there talking about how the Great Barrier Reef is dying and shit like that to get them to stop digging up coal and selling coal, because Australia sells about $71 billion a year in coal because their coal is high-grade coal. That's the good shit. It's real good shit, right? So U.S. production of shale gas goes up. There's a bump. Sharikova shows up and says, uh-oh, doomsday, doomsday, doomsday. Better shut that shit down. They do this analysis around the world. This analysis, you know what I mean? And now there's this FUD here where the guy is saying, we think that it might be microbes. And if it's microbes, what that means is that it's a feedback. That it's an earthborne feedback that you can't do nothing about. And what Cam's Copernicus, and if you read down in the verbiage of Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service, this whole site is here. The sole purpose of it is to shame polluters, to shame the emitters of greenhouse gases, etc. Right? And what this shows, if this is to be believed, this is from their Copernicus satellite, which is a badass satellite. Supposedly, it's a badass system. And I mean, to really, to say that this is what it is, So it's like, who's lying? Okay, who's lying? Who's full of shit here? For them to just say this and that these emissions only look like this in the wintertime, it has to be from oil and gas production. It has to be from people running their heaters. You know, it just does. It's, you know, it doesn't make any sense. If it was from microbes, then this emission would be heavier in the summertime when the temperature is up, and that's when you get more microbial activity. Unless somebody else out there has a better idea, and maybe they do. So, these emissions are from man-made sources, but that's kind of sort of as tight as I can get it, you know. But that's basically where it's at, and the crux of it comes down to, okay, what has a lower carbon-13 ratio to carbon-12? Microbial emissions from wastewater and the city dump and cow butts, or right, or, you know, which all comes from plants. You know what I mean? Is that less, or is, you know, gas that's been trapped underground, is that less for decades and you know, for millennia, for millions of years? Shale gas, right? What other processes are involved? So anyway, that's that, and the upshot is the shit is like hitting the fan. That's the surface level, you know. And now we got, you know, anomalous cold temperatures. Over the past year, we've already seen the shit hitting the fan with large volumes of rain. It only makes sense that we would also see large volumes of snow. So just to reiterate, this is the whistle. I talk about a cob whistle, a sports whistle, like the whistle that Kate Winslet used in the Titanic. I won't blow it loud because I don't want to blow my system. Cheap. This is made of plastic. Good thing to have around. Put around your kid's neck, whatever. If you live in an area above the 30th, 40th parallel, somewhere like that. And I'm not just talking about America. If you live in China, Inner Mongolia or whatever, that'd be a real good time to get your shit together, if you can. And something that's important to be able to do is to be able to get the snow off your roof. Minnesota roof raiser, something like that. I don't sell any of this stuff. I'm not an affiliate person. Oh, wow, they got them at Home Depot. They've got snow removal devices. If you don't have one, you know, they sell them all over the place. I don't sell the stuff. I don't sell anything. I don't sell any affiliate stuff. But I point this out because if you live in some of these areas, Colorado, Montana, the Dakotas, you know, places like that, or, you know, really, maybe some other areas further south along the Armageddon line, around the 40th parallel, out west in the upper areas of Oregon and Washington State and all of that, or the upper elevations of California, they've already seen heavy snow this year. But we're talking about devastatingly, or in the Alps regions of Italy, Switzerland, France, Germany, Austria, even places up in Iran, Afghanistan, you know, around the world where you live in cold areas where it snows. Expect that you may have some extraordinarily heavy snow. When I'm talking about extraordinary, I'm talking about tens of feet of snow. Enough snow to crush an ordinary wood frame house, to have your roof cave in. And that's why I'm saying, if you can get something to get the roof, the snow off your roof, if you live in a single family home or whatever, or log cabin or whatever you're living in, if you can get something to get that snow off your roof, it might be a good idea to have that. The whistle is for traveling. You know, you go take a trip to the store. Oh wow, we ran out of milk, or we ran out of something that we really need, or I got to get grandma's prescription, or whatever the hell it is. So you got to take a minor road trip up to CVS or wherever you go, and you get fucking snowed in on the roadside. It's always a good idea to have extra provisions in your car, gallon or so of drinking water, with some snacks, some toilet paper, an extra blanket. You know, you might even want to have a flare gun. But this right here, a whistle, so that people can find you if you get buried in the snow or whatever, or or if you're being attacked by an animal. Even sometimes it's helpful. You can get little handheld citizens band radios or ham radio. Wow, some of them are pretty expensive. You can get a Kenwood for $400, but they've got others. Bofang, from Amazon, $69.89. Wow, they got some expensive stuff too. $89.78. You can get a pair of. See, now this is nice. You can get a pair, and again, I'm not an affiliate. I don't sell any of this stuff, but I point this out because you might be in need of. Like, I have family across town. If I lived in an area, I live in Florida, so it's not really that much of an issue here. But in other areas where I've got family across town, the cell tower might get knocked out. In which case, it would be good to have a radio that you can communicate and see how people are doing across town. And there are rules, for communicating on a ham radio. There are a lot of really convenient channels on there, government channels and weather channels and things like that. You can get a lot of information about what's going on, apparently. But that's like, there's a whole culture with that I really know nothing about. So that's like, you'd have to research that. You'd have to get on the internet, look around, see what the real deal is. But it's probably better to have it than not have it if you live above the 40th parallel in rural areas where it snows a lot, because we're talking about potential amounts of snow that would leave you buried long enough to be problematic. In recent years, there were a couple of different people that were buried in their car by the roadside, like in 10 plus feet of snow for like 2 weeks. And that could suck. So having extra socks, having extra clothes, stuff I can't even think of, but toilet paper, paper towels, hand sanitizer, maybe a bucket if you got to take a shit or something like that. You know what I'm saying? This, do some research and see what it takes to survive, and just kind of sort of have that stuff in your mind, and don't travel if you don't have to. And if you do, if you got to take a small trip somewhere, check the news, check the weather, keep your eye on the weather. Seriously. Because, it'll bounce up and down, it'll get cold for a while, and it'll get warm for a while, but the common denominator is, and what we've seen over the last year, is massive amounts of precipitation, which in the wintertime necessarily means massive amounts of snow. And that's what I've been talking about for years now. So do what you got to do. Doesn't hurt to have extra provisions. Doesn't hurt to have extra medication for you and your pets and your grandma, and you know what I mean, and all that stuff. Extra pet food, cat food, dog food. Keep your snow shovel in the house. You know what I mean? In other words, don't leave it leaning against the side of the house, because there have been people that have been buried, like in Wales, I think. Somebody was they opened their front door and there was nothing but snow there. So this is a thing. It's out there. This is what this is what we're looking like right now. And again, these warm areas on the map, a lot of times that's precipitation. As you can see, that there's both snow, there's rain on the bottom of this formation here, right around Illinois, and above that is snow. And it looks like on the map, it's anomalously warm. That's a thing. So there it is. Keep your eye on the weather, and nothing to fear but fear itself. I don't want people to be afraid necessarily. I'm just saying it helps to be aware and be prepared. That's all. And that's about it. Let's see what that's doing. Yeah, okay. That's what's happening. And if you listen to the Grand Solar Minimum people, they're basically saying the same thing, but for other reasons. Or and it's, to me, it's I'm not going to throw out anything. Yeah, that's true. And when you look at the sun, you can see that there are less sunspots. So it's happening. But the narrative is, and you know, the reason I do this really is because they got on this narrative about Venus, Earth, and that's I don't see that happening. It's a tussle between people who say that Earth is going to turn into Venus because of global warming, and no, it's going to turn into an ice cube because of the grand solar minimum. And it's, you know, it's the grand solar minimum. People are probably closer to what you're, you know, that what they're talking about is the kind of stuff that's probably closer to what you're actually going to experience. But it's complicated, and you know, who really knows who the winner, you know, where the winners and losers are going to be in this whole episode. But it may go sideways in ways that most people don't really even expect. We really don't know. But this is a hell of an experiment they're running. And again, like I said, that this, we see this in the wintertime typically. And in closing, I got to show this one more time for the uninitiated. Carbon dioxide at the 500 hectopascal level. It's closer to the Earth. This is 18,000 feet, I believe, somewhere in that neck of the woods. Carbon dioxide's closer around the pole. But at 50 hectopascals, about 67,000 feet. Is a band right around the equator. And again, it's still, you know, 1,000 parts per million. On my phone it says 600 parts per million, so don't know what that's about. Oh, no, it's back to 1,000. See, every time they hear me talking about it, it was 600 parts per million earlier. When I looked at it earlier, it's like every time I set my phone down for a little while and I pick it back up, it says 600 parts per million. And then when I go to talk about it and I get on the internet with my computer and I look at it, it says 1,000 parts per million. It's, you know, it's like, okay, all right, Elon. Stop screwing around. Anyway, that's it. My name is R. Crosby Lyles. Thanks for watching, guys. And, you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Don't take any wooden nickels. And make up your own mind. Ain't no good guys, ain't no bad guys. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. Thanks for watching. Love you guys. Take care. And I don't need anything from you. If you want to subscribe, that's cool. Thank you. You know, this is basically a public service type of thing. You know, my stuff is monetized, but I don't really make any. I don't make anything from this. You know, I don't make any money from nobody makes money from YouTube anymore. It's there really so that it helps. You know, it's better for the algorithm. But you know, why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they make their chunk? So yeah, if you like this content, you know, hit the like, you know, subscribe and share, and leave a comment. You know, if you got any better ideas out there, or you know about studies or any of that other kind of stuff, or you got, you know, some hot ideas about what's up, leave a comment. And take care. You know, my name's R. Crosby Lyles. This has been News from the Can. Thanks for watching. See ya.